Hey there everyone, Paolo here, and welcome back. Today we are taking a look at Shadow Warrior 2. Before we dive in too far, this is a mature game. Well, it's actually a very immature game, but it's an M-rated game. So if that's something you're not interested in, be warned now. There's a lot of Wang jokes, there's a lot of middle fingers and cursing and all of that. The gameplay also may be nausea-inducing to some people. I don't know how it's going to play out when it's finally rendered. This game is a lot about melee combat in first person with a lot of sprinting, dodging, jumping all over the place, very sporadic movement, and I don't know how well that's going to translate to watching. So keep those two things in mind, and with that out of the way, let's get into it. So I was really concerned about Shadow Warrior 2. I loved the first game. In fact, it's one of the first videos, if not the first YouTube video I ever put up. And for the year it came out, which I'm thinking was 2013 now, it was probably my game of the year. I really enjoyed it. I thought it had amazing melee combat with less than amazing gunplay, but the melee more than made up for it. A fun story that went on reasonably long, told actually an interesting story with some decently well-designed characters and character arcs to follow, which was all very weird, but some also great single-player linear level design. It was just all around really good in my opinion. I really enjoyed it. However, I was concerned about Shadow Warrior 2 because it was promising a lot initially. They were promising things like a randomized open world, a randomly generated open sandbox world with random loot drops and randomized weapons similar to Borderlands, and all these things. And while Flying Wild Hawks has done pretty good with the first Shadow Warrior, there's also that game, I can't remember what it's called, not Recore, where you have like one weapon. It doesn't really matter. The games they put out have been pretty good, but they were never on this scope that they were promising for Shadow Warrior 2. And pleasantly, the game's actually really good. Now, it's really good because a lot of what they were promising has been reduced or removed almost entirely. So, what do we have? Well, for the background, what you're going to be watching is it's best for me just to show you mostly uncut footage. So I'm going to unedit this as much as possible. There will be times where I talk about like the inventory, I'll edit that in and everything. But most of what you're going to see is going to be I've picked up a mission, I'm just now out into the world completing the mission. Because there's a lot of flow and there's an ebb and flow to the combat similar to the recent Doom that I think you just kind of have to watch. And you're either going to enjoy it or you're not. So that's going to be what's going on in the background. But what has become of Shadow Warrior, what the final result of Shadow Warrior 2 was a much toned down promise of what they did that still delivers enough that I absolutely enjoyed this game. I think it was great. So gone is the procedurally generated random open world, large open world, and what has been replaced with it is several, I would say 5 or 6, I don't know exactly how many they are as I haven't finished the game yet, but 5 or 6, maybe upwards of 8 reasonably large sandboxes. Think Crysis 3, I think would probably be the best example. In Crysis 3, you had a lot of these little, you get into these playpen sandbox areas that weren't massive. We're not talking Grand Theft Auto style here, but large enough that you had a good 15 to 30 minute playstyle within these areas, and then there would be a small linear path connecting one to the next one, and then another reasonably large sandbox you would play in and do your things, and this was how the environment changed. Think that with a little bit bigger. I would say the sandboxes in Shadow Warrior are a bit bigger than those in Crysis 3, though they're also not connected through tubes. You actually use teleport system to go back and forth between a hub. So you start at, there's kind of a social hub area where you're going to be picking up quests. You then teleport out to one of these sandboxes, wherever your mission is, one of these 5, 6, or whatever there's going to be eventually when I finally fit it through it. And you'll do a mission in there. And then you'll go back. And these 5 or 6 sandboxes aren't randomly generated, but what they do is the item you're picking up in some cases, or whatever you're hunting for out there, can be put in random places around the zone. The mobs are also somewhat randomly spawned. And there is a system similar to Borderlands where there's rare elite mobs that have different roles, elemental resist, elemental strengths to them, knockback, different things they can have. They will be randomly spawned and placed throughout the zone. So while you're going to be going through the same, let's say 6 zones over and over quite a few times. Each time you play through it, you're going to be playing it a little bit different than you did the time before. Enough that I didn't really mind it. I definitely noticed the repetition of the zones, but it didn't really bother me too much. Okay, so that's that. The weapon system is also not randomly generated. This is not something that, it's not Borderlands weapon system, though it does have some semblance of the Borderlands weapon system. What there is there's, I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe 75 hand-designed weapons in the game. At time of recording, I've received roughly 20 of them. So this is through the first half of the game, which means either you're going to have to play through a lot or multiple playthroughs in order to get it, or a lot of them come at the end. Now, the weapons come in different forms. Some of them come directly from quest givers. You'll finish a quest. As a reward, you'll get a weapon for it. You can also get them from drops off elites. There's some of them that are specifically placed within the environment that at a certain point the environment opens up and you can get it, and that same weapon's there every single time. And then there are some others that are just randomly dropped off of rare elite mobs or, like I said, chest spawns. So there's a lot of different ways. Oh, you can also buy them. You can buy weapons. There's vendors in the game that rotate an inventory that updates every so often with weapons. So there's a bunch of different ways to get the weapons. And the weapons come in a handful of different categories. You have swords, you have things like chainsaws, you have nail guns and bows and arrows, machine guns, little fist weapons. There's a lot of different weapon variety in here. And not all of them are great. I'm not going to sit here and say that they're all great. You know, out of the 20 or 25 I've seen, I like probably 3/4 of them. I would say about 25% I was kind of Mainly the Uzis, they didn't really do anything for me. They just felt they didn't have any power behind them. They felt really like the target was very bullet spongy when using them. The hand cannons I also wasn't a big fan of, but I love the melee weapons. I like the rocket launchers. I like the grenade launchers. I like the chainsaw. The chainsaw is awesome. The heavier weapons I really enjoy. It's just more of the lot of bullets at a target that don't do a lot of damage weapons I wasn't a big fan of. But that's just all personal preference. And even when I say that, there is a minigun, or there's several miniguns, and that guy is actually enjoyable to use. It's more of the Uzi type things, but they're split up into different categories. So the weapons are Borderlands-esque, as in there's a lot of variety and they'll have different abilities on them, but they're not generated like Borderlands where it's just a dice roll and you get some random stats. Each one was custom designed to have a certain uniqueness about it across the spectrum of 75 weapons. So that's what they did. If you came into Shadow Warrior 2, read what was originally promised a year or two back, and then see what it has, it definitely has stepped back. It said, all right, we can't actually deliver on this, and it stepped back. I'm okay with that, because what it still delivered is a lot of fun. It is really quite an enjoyable game to play. The game does have problems, which we'll get to later on, but what is there is very similar to the most recent Doom, where there's just this core gameplay loop of combat that I find very enjoyable to go through, especially the melee combat. The melee combat is similar to what it was in the first game, simplified in some areas, but expanded in some other areas. So you have a lot of the same movements, like right and then right mouse button, or left or right movement. So A or D plus right mouse button does one thing, W plus right mouse button does another thing, S plus right mouse button does another thing. There's blocks, so you can like kind of parry attack as it's coming in, and then you have abilities like Z, X, C that do different things. Some of them will make you vanish. Some of them will call spikes up out of the ground to impale targets. One of them is like this Psy Blast that knocks enemies back. And you get into this combat flow that just becomes really good because there is this elemental resist within the targets. And you'll see this popping up when you come across a rare or elite mob. And the mobs will come in like 4 different varieties. You have mobs that are on fire, mobs that are frozen, mobs that are toxic, and mobs that are electric. And they kind of pair down where a fire mob is weak to frost, a frost mob is weak to fire. A toxic mob is weak to electric, an electric mob is weak to toxic. And then they resist their own element, as you'd expect. So you'll be fighting along, and all of a sudden there's just this big elite there, and you're trying to figure out, all right, what does it have? You're switching weapons. Okay, this guy's electric, so I want to pull out a toxic weapon. So you were using a sword, but now you're using a chainsaw because it has toxic on it. And then while you're fighting that guy, you realize, oh, there's actually a fire guy in here too. So as soon as that guy's down, you're switching over to a frost weapon, and you're fighting with that, and then you're back into it with a shotgun, and then you're throwing a minigun out, and you're just mowing targets down. And you're doing all this while you have an insane amount of movement. And had to have noticed that by now if you're watching the footage. And what it is you have unlimited stamina within this game. You can sprint forever. If you hit shift isn't your sprint. Sprint is double tap W forward. So double tap forward and then you sprint, right? Shift is kind of this dodge, and it goes whichever direction you're moving. So if you're going forward and hit, you dodge forward. If you're going backwards and hit, you dodge backwards, right, and left. You have unlimited dodges. You also have a double jump, which you can use unlimitedly, but you have to hit the ground between. So you can only jump 2, hit the ground, jump 2, hit the ground, and so forth. And it just gives you, because there's no limitations to how much of this you have, it allows you to really get this quick dance of death going, where you're bouncing in and out, hitting targets, bouncing away, cutting them down, reevaluating what your target has, changing weapons to a different weapon, jumping back in there, and going on. There's also no fall damage in the game. Absolutely none. You can fall off the highest thing there is, and you do this brief little roll, combat roll-like thing, where you hit the ground, which immobilizes you for about a half second, and then you're up and going again. So, in terms of movement, it's kind of like if someone hacked in cheat codes into a normal first-person shooter, and you just went at it. And it really works. Now, what I did find, though, was because of this movement speed, the normal gameplay, the normal game difficulty, actually is what I should say, was actually kind of easy. Because you can blink in and out, jump in, dodge out, and do all these things, you can avoid quite a bit of damage. And I found that the normal game mode was actually a little too easy. This is amplified by the fact that if you look in the bottom left-hand corner, there's a chi bar. So your health bar, and then there's also a chi bar. Now, what you see going on with my chi bar is not indicative of the way you're going to start out. I'll explain that here in a moment. But essentially, this chi is used for all those abilities I was talking about before, the vanish, the impale, the knockback. They can also be used for a heal. If you hold Q, you can heal yourself over time. So the fact that you have all this movement ability, plus then if you do get in trouble, you can just sprint away from the targets while healing, blink a few times or dodge a few times, and you're back at full health and then come back in, made just the normal difficulty far too easy for me. Now, the chi bar, generally speaking, at least early on, doesn't actually regenerate all that quickly or regenerate at all. The game has a skill system, and we'll dive into this a little bit more in depth, but what you're seeing here is me at roughly level 17 or 18 in the game. And for this, I have maxed out my chi regen. So I have a very fast chi regen going on, and you'll notice I use it to heal, and within 3 seconds, it's back at full. In some cases, as I heal, it's recharging as fast as I'm consuming it. So this is kind of in advance, like how I spec my character out. If you don't do this, you don't have that high chi regen, you may actually find that the normal difficulty might be right in place for you. But for me, I found that it was just too easy. Hard mode felt about right, though even in places hard mode, now that my character's starting to get higher levels, I found hard mode to actually be almost too easy too, because I have unlimited chi, so I can continue to heal myself every 30 seconds for a huge amount, and I've also boosted how much I heal for. But yeah, hopefully you're getting the idea of it's kind of very similar to Doom, but not quite Doom. Doom, like, there's an obvious comparison here because both of them came out within 6 months of each other. They're both kind of bringing that classic first-person formula and trying to modernize it while still staying a little traditional to it. And they both do it reasonably well, but slightly different. Doom has a much more meaty and impactful type system to it. Right, Doom's movement is good, it's solid, but there's more weight and momentum behind it, whereas Lo Wang is much quicker, he's more nimble, but he doesn't have that force or momentum behind him. Unfortunately, it's not, like I said, it's not, well, let's talk co-op first. Another great thing about co-op, before we go into the bad stuff, about the game is, as I said earlier on, it was designed with co-op in mind, and the co-op is actually really good. The way it's done, though, is It's done with some pretty cool insights without being perfect. And I don't think there is a perfect solution here. What it is when you first launch the game, you can decide single player, multiplayer, or open. Single player, invite only, multiplayer, or open. And then you decide a difficulty, normal, medium, hard, extreme. And then you can also scale the game depending on how many players. So you can choose 1 player, 2 player, 3 player, 4 player, and it'll scale the difficulty of the enemies in accordance with that. You then launch into the game, and depending on how you do it, people basically what they do is they download your save file and join in on your world. Now, while they're in your world, what they can do is whenever they kill anything, any loot that drops, loot is not shared. Each person has their own loot table. Whatever loot you see, the other person's not going to see, and they're not going to see your loot. So you don't have to worry about stealing their weapons, ammo, anything like that. Each person gets their own loot. All of that is picked up separately. Any loot that you get as someone playing in someone else's game, you get to keep. Any cash you make, you get to keep. You earn XP, you level up, all of that you get to keep. Even when the player that you're joined into completes a mission. Some of the missions, as I spoke of earlier, give rewards like weapons. If they get a weapon, you also get that weapon if you have not already completed that on your own side. So you can go back and at a higher level, you can join in on a low level brand new player, work the way through, and they'll complete the missions, they'll get the rewards. And if you do not have that word already, you'll also get that reward. And this comes into play because some quests actually offer 2 different item returns, meaning you complete it and you'll be able to choose from one of 2 different weapons. You only get one of those. So you can play through once, have friend A join you, and you choose the first weapon, then you stop, you turn around, they load up their save, you join on them, go through, and then they choose weapon B, and you end up with both weapons from the quest. You do have to do the quest twice, but you can't do it twice on your own, so you split it up that way. So all in all, it's a pretty good system. Obviously, you're joining on someone else, your save progress is not getting advanced, so when you do go back over to your save, any quests that were completed on the other side, you still need to do yourself if you've not done them, which is a little bit annoying, but I also think it's probably the best of both worlds, because otherwise you would have to be at the same spot, right? In order to join on someone else's game, you have to both be in the same mission or same approximate area, barring side quests, in order to progress. Otherwise, you couldn't join on them. It would limit you down. What they've done allows for you to join on basically anyone you want to, or literally anyone you want to, get some rewards. The only downside is you don't progress your story. So, good. Characters. The story so far is okay. But even then, the story of the first Shadow Warrior, until the last 3 hours, was okay. Now, like I've said, I haven't finished the game. I've currently put in one character, I have about 9 hours into it. The other character, I have about 6 hours into it. And that's because I started a second character to play along with a friend who bought the game, mainly because I got tired. I didn't want to carry him. I was level 17 and he was level 1, and I was just kind of carrying him through it. So it was easier for me to go back and create a new character and just play alongside him, so we were roughly both the same level. So that's the only reason for that. And at, what did I say it was, about 9 hours in on the higher character, I'm a little over 50% of the way through the story. And so far the story's okay. Actually, it has some really good characters. The character writing is pretty well done. The voice acting and all of this is very Shadow Warrior, Lo Wang kind of cheese. And it's going to be one of those things you either love or hate. Oddly enough, I am normally someone that actually hates this type of thing. Normally the potty humor type thing just turns me off. It doesn't work for me in general. For some reason with this game, though, it does work. And I've been trying to figure out why, and the best thing I can come up with is most of the time when it's used in the context of trying to act more mature than you are, or more edgy or more hardcore than you are. You know, it's something that you expect a 9, 10, or 12-year-old to be saying in a lot of circumstances. I don't get that impression from Shadow Warrior. When they make the Wang jokes and they talk about it, it's far more tongue-in-cheek, almost in a British style type thing. Like, yeah, we realize it's stupid. Ha ha ha. Let's move on with it type thing. And for that reason, or at least I think that reason, it actually clicks for me, and I kind of like it. I'm not going to come out and claim it's high humor. No one's going to mistake this game as, a work of art. This is not going to be one of those ones we put up there to show the rest of the world how far video gaming has progressed in storytelling. No. It's pretty lowbrow humor, but it's done in a manner that actually works for me rather than a turnoff. But be ready. A lot of wang jokes, meaning dick jokes, a lot of F this, F that, a lot of cursing. It's very just upfront about it, but it does it in a way that, I don't know, somehow works for me. For you, it's going to be either a take it or leave it. Yeah, I think that's most all what I would say is the good side. The story so far, the characters and all that. Now, there's some area that I'm going to talk about next. Isn't necessarily good, but it also isn't necessarily bad. It does show a flaw depending on how you approach it. So we've talked about the weapons, we've talked about the character and the leveling and everything. And this is something I know Total Biscuit has a big problem with. I fall more in the middle of it doesn't really bother me. And that is, so your weapons that you get out of the 75 weapons, and you've probably seen me picking up hundreds and hundreds of these items on the ground, there's these things called runes. And all weapons have 3 rune slots. You also then have 3 armor slots, you have 3 ability slots. So in total, you can slot a lot of runes, and you're constantly picking up new runes. Most of them are gray, but they come in different varieties of gray, green, gray, blue, gold, I think. Maybe it's 3, gray, blue, gold, gray, blue, yellow, something like that. And the runes come with different rolls on them depending on what they are. If they're for a weapon, they might add crit chance, add reload speed, reduce rate of fire, or increase spread, increase damage, reduce magazine size. Some of them are all positive. Some of them add elemental damage. You'll add toxic damage or frost damage, and this is how you get weapons that counter those enemies I was talking about earlier that are resistant to X but weak to Y. And you put these runes in the different weapons to customize them out a little bit. And for the most part, a lot of them, like I said, are pretty standard, just plus crit, plus damage, plus rate of fire, plus magazine, whatever. But there are some that do some interesting things. There's some that will, for example, they'll make your projectiles do explosion damage or explode on impact. They'll make your projectiles split, turning it kind of into like a shard thrower. There's some for like the larger ones, like the rocket launcher or the minigun, that turn it into a turret. So you'll when you go to shoot it, rather than shoot it, you toss it on the ground and it sits there and spins around and shoots at things while you're running around using other weapons. Some of them put things like life drain or chi drain, life after kill. A lot of this. Now, this does allow you to customize your weapons and allows the same 75 weapons. You can pretty much kit them out to do quite a few different things. It gives a lot more variety to the weapons. But what it does do is it means there can be a lot of downtime where you're just going through managing your inventory because you're picking up so many of these and a lot of them are just kind of trash. So you can either take them and you can sell them to one of the vendors, or you can actually, roughly a third of the way through the game, you gain the ability to combine 3 of them together to upgrade to a higher end rune. And you're going to spend a lot of time doing this. Now, if you're someone that needs to keep everything perfectly clean and organized the entire way through, you're going to be stopping literally every 2 minutes to look at runes. For me, the first hour of the game, I did a lot of this, mainly because you have brand new weapons. Your weapons are still pretty weak. But once I got 2 or 3 weapons reasonably well kitted out to the point that I was happy and I was flowing through the game pretty well, now what I do is I play the game for 90 minutes to 2 hours, maybe even 3 hours. And then after, let's say, a 2-hour window, I'll go back, I'll strip all my weapons of all their runes, and I'll spend 10 or 15 minutes going through and first I decide, are there new weapons I want to use? All right, let's get rid of this weapon, we'll put this weapon in place. Once I have my weapons chosen, I'll then go through and re-rune all of my weapons. And I'll re-rune all of my armor. And like I said, it can take upwards of 15 minutes. But for me, it's 15 minutes every 2 hours. And it allows me to customize my player the way I want to, or at least my weapons and playstyle the way I want to. So it does add more depth, it does add more complexity, but you have to have that self-control. If you don't have that self-control in every pickup, you're re-examining what it is and resocketing it, the game's going to be more time inventory management rather than actual playing. And your mileage is going to vary on that. For me, it doesn't bother me at all. It really doesn't. I don't mind if every 2 hours I spend 15 minutes doing inventory management. And I wouldn't even need to do that. It's not like I'm suddenly unable to kill. It's just like, all right, I could probably resocket this weapon and get another 10% out of it. So pull those out. All right, let's redo the toxic damage, and then we'll throw a splitter in there, and then we'll increase the crit chance. All right, that weapon's done, and we'll continue on. There's also skill point upgrades within the system. So I was saying earlier how my character's like level 18 or whatever. What you do is each time you level up, also from quests, you'll get some skill points back, which you get these card system. And the cards are different abilities, and they have different amount you can put into them. So you can spend 1 skill point to increase your HP by 10. 1 skill point to increase it by an additional 10, up to 20. Then 2 skill points to raise it up to 30. 2 more to raise it up to 40, and then 3 to raise it up to 50, so you can increase your HP by 50. This is how I made my chi where it regenerates. I went ahead and I maxed out. I put all of them, what ended up costing me roughly 15 skill points. So at level 18, it cost me most of my skill points to max out my chi regen. Now at level 18, I actually have like 25 skill points because you get them from quests and such. But that's how I kitted my character out. You can also reset your skill points with the one vendor. It costs not real world, but it costs in-game currency. You can reset your skill points and redo it. So there is customization for your character. My character, I went with a very heavy melee focus. So I'm going for plus HP, I'm going for improving the heal, I'm going for improving melee damage, and then I have runes socketed in my armor, which actually reduce my weapon damage, or reduce my ranged weapon damage, but increase my melee damage. So I'm at the point where I'm doing like 65% extra melee damage with my character, and that's what I do 90% of the time. The only time I'll switch out is when there's some fight that I really run into trouble, and you gotta be at range. And, it works for what it is, but that's what I enjoy. And, been talking a lot here. What are we up to? 26 minutes. Holy crap. All right, let's clean it up. Overall, I really like Shadow Warrior. Considering it's a non-$60, it's $40, I think, for the average person. Cheaper if you own Shadow Warrior 1. What it does for just a fun co-op shooter where you're running around cutting demons apart and blowing them apart with shotguns and missile launchers, disemboweling things, attacking bunny rabbits where every 6 bunny rabbit or so turns into this giant demon rabbit that runs at you on fire, and the Wang jokes and everything. I love it. I think it's a terrific game. I highly recommend it. It's not going to be for everyone. You're going to have to watch the combat. Do you like that visceral first-person shooter combat? If you like good melee combat in a first-person battle, cutting through demons? If you do, if you like the most recent Doom, you're probably going to really like Shadow Warrior 2. And I cannot give it much better recommendation than that. Not for everybody, but you'll probably know if it's for you or not. Alright, that's my thoughts on Shadow Warrior 2. Until next time, this has been Pallor. Thanks for watching.
That was nice. Looks like these guys left in a hurry. Someone or something scared them off.
And not a leaf left.
If I didn't know better, I'd say this was the work of a roving band of foppish British noblemen.